All right. So we have on the Keologic website this blog that goes through all these instructions. I'm going to keep it up on this on the left side of my screen so everyone can see as I follow through. But I'm also going to just put the link in the chat. So if you want to save it for later, if you want to follow along, jump ahead, whatever, you can do that as well. But like Justin said, there's been a lot about kind of the what you do once you got this set up, how to do semantic finds and everything, but not a lot about this. So we actually set out to install our create our own local LLM server, and we found a few different sources that had bits and pieces of this, but not everything. And so that's really where this comes from, is we've kind of pulled from our own experience, from official FileMaker documentation, from just a few different places and people that have put things together to put kind of a full comprehensive document together. So the first step, we have to actually spin up the server. These instructions are using AWS EC2, but as it says, it would be similar for other cloud services. So first, we need to actually launch the instance. For most of this, I'm just going to be using the name LLM demo, and we'll be using an Ubuntu 24.04 instance. So for the instance type, we're in this, I'm going to be using a T3A 2XL. It's not absolutely necessary for it to be that large. I think what we've got running right now might be a smaller, even a medium. But what we found is it'll run faster during installation if it's this large. So something you could do is install it, get everything up and running with it this size, and then afterwards lower that back down to a smaller or medium or whatever size you feel is necessary. But like I said, we're going to use the 2XL. So let's create a key pair. If you have one already from a previous installation, that's an option you can select, but I'm just going to make a new one. We need to choose a subnet, so we'll just use this US West 1C. And we need 3 specific ports open. So we're going to make a security group for that, and that's all listed right here. So we need SSH available, which I'm just going to restrict to my IP. And then we need port 80, which is the HTTP port, and then port 8080. Those. We'll do 30 gigs of storage. And then down here for this IAM instance profile, select this role for EC2. So that's all listed right up there. And that should be everything that we need. So I'm going to go ahead and get this launched. While this is, yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. What is the role of the key pair? I always see that, and what does it do? I'm asking everybody. Is it just a necessary thing to have, or does it get used in a specific way?
Yes, that's how we authenticate to actually log in to SSH into the server.
Got it. So that's the key pair for the SSH. Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. So while that's launching, we're going to do this next step. So we need to create and associate an Elastic IP. So again, still in AWS, just go to Elastic IPs. Let's allocate a new one. This is not necessary, but makes it a little easier if we add a tag so we know what it is. And then from here, we can now associate this Elastic IP with that instance. Let's associate it. And then I'm going to copy this, because the next step, we're going to create an A record so we can have so we don't have to refer to the server by the IP address. We can have an actual name to point to. So let me go here. What we're using, again, still AWS, to create an A record pointing to that Elastic IP. So we're going to create. I'm just going to call this llmdemo.keologic.com. paste that elastic IP as the value. Select 1 minute and create directory. All right. So now back over here, this instance should be up. And so finally, we just need to connect to it. So in AWS anyway, if you press connect, there's 2 options. So you can use this session manager to connect just right from the web browser. Still, it'd be all the instructions would be essentially the same, or you can just use an SSH client like the terminal, which is what we're going to do. So I'm going to open up terminal. So first, and this gives you kind of all your instructions. Open it, locate your private key file. You'll run this command if necessary is what it says. I've never found it to not be necessary, so we're gonna run it. So it's just chmod 400, and then you can drag and drop that file, that key pair in. So that is what's actually, let me show you. This is what was downloaded with that key pair. It's just that LLM underscore demo.pem. So just dropping that in. Press enter. Oh, I just moved that, so I'm gonna redo that. There we go. All right, and then we can connect. So it shows us in this example what we need to do. It uses the full location, EC2-54 and whatnot. Because we created that DNS, the llmdemo.keologic.com, we can actually connect that way. So we're just going to go Ubuntu at llmdemo.keologic.com.
Is it possible you have that LLM name, that PM file name used in your known hosts?
Shouldn't. No, I cleared it just before this, but I'll double check.
I think it's generally fair to say that you guys did a lot of work on this, and it's a fairly involved process, but you were able to figure it out.
So I'm just going to do what they have then, and we can come back to that. Or it could be that maybe this first step didn't actually run. Let's try it again. There we go.
There we go.
So this is what should come up. It'll ask, are you sure you want to continue connecting? If it's your first time, so I'm just going to say yes. All right, and now we're in. So now we can continue with these instructions. So the first thing we're going to do is just actually check for any updates or upgrades and proceed with those. This is a big part of why we do it on a 2XL server instance, is so that these steps will go a little faster. There's a few that, as we ran this on smaller instances, we found them taking a lot longer. So it's,
yeah, and a nice thing with AWS is you can change the instance type at any point. So you can go from the very largest to the very smallest just by shutting down your server and changing it on their console.
Is this installing the model?
So this is just updating Ubuntu right now. We're installing, so we have the latest version. Yeah.
It's running an update and then it's upgrading it. So pretty much any process, like anytime that you install a new server, you have to run these 5 steps.
Got it. So this is all before the LLM itself. This is setting up the environment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And then lastly, we'll reboot. So this is going to take a second. While it does, our next step is to actually download the open source LLM files. This, I'm just going to, it says important, I'm going to call it out anyway. These will come in a FileMaker server install. If you had version 20 and upgraded, we found that it didn't download the upgraded versions of these files. So we provided a zip right here. And there's two ways to actually get this onto our Linux server. We can either download them locally and upload to the server, which is what this command would do, or just download directly to the server, which is what we're going to do. So first we have to install zip so we can actually unzip it. It's going to ask if we want to continue, and we do. And now let's get those. And we'll unzip it. And this is just some cleanup. So just before we actually move on, I'm just going to show really quickly, we're in our home folder. We have now this open _source _LLM directory. If I go in there, you can see there's a few subdirectories. There's also some text files. This readme.txt includes some of these instructions. There's also this requirements.txt that we'll be referring back to later. That has a lot of just a list of like the libraries and everything that are required. So we'll come back to that.
I
First,
think
we're going
in that shared folder, there are some files that are editable if you wanted to tweak some of the settings of your local LLM server, but you don't have to.
All right. So now we're going to install certbot, as it says, to manage the SSL certificates. And finally, we'll reboot. I'll give it just a second to come back up. Didn't wait long enough. There we go. All right, so now we'll configure the firewall. So these, again, those are the 3 ports that we opened up on when we set up the instance. So we need to ensure those are allowed before we enable this. So allow SSH, port 80, and port 8080, and then finally turn it on. When you do so, you should get this caution and confirmation. So we'll say, yes, we want to continue. And now it's active. All right. So now we'll actually obtain an SSL certificate. So these 2 steps you'll notice are essentially the same. The first thing we're going to do, this has this -- dry run at the end. We're going to simulate getting an SSL certificate. So if there's any issues, we can go back and correct them before we actually try to run through that. You'll note pretty much anywhere in this whole document, if you see this llm.mydomain.com, you're going to replace it with your domain. So for here, we need to replace llm.mydomain with llmdemo.keologic.com, and we'll run it. It's going to ask for an email address, and you have to agree to the terms of service. And here we go. So it's simulating the cert request, and it was successful. So we should be good then. to actually generate the SSL certificate. Once again, it asks for email address. You have to agree to the terms of service. And then for the actual request, it's going to ask if you want to share your email address to get any information they're going to send. I'm just going to say no. And there we go. So now we've got the SSL certificate. So this next step, rather than us having to come in and generate a new one, we're going to run. This will auto renew that SSL. We need to ensure that port 80 is open. It doesn't need to be open otherwise. So we're going to run, create this and have it do that for us. So here we just created a new file. We're just going to copy and paste this in. All it's going to do is when this auto renewal runs, it's going to come in here, allow port 80. So let's save that and make that executable. And then it will run the renewal. And then afterwards, it's going to run this next file that we're creating down here, this post hook. And what that's going to do is just close port 80 and then reboot the server. So save that. Make that executable. And then similar to above, we're going to run a dry run to make sure everything runs correctly. If it does, it will tell you what it's doing, and it ran successfully because it just shut down, just rebooted. So we'll give it a second to reboot. While it's rebooting, we can kind of start with this next step. So we're going to now, we actually need to generate an admin PKI key pair and a JWT. Soliant has provided a really nice tool for this using FileMaker. So I'm just going to download this and open it up. And this is what it looks like. So we can see both. And we've got all these instructions laid out. So you downloaded it, we'll open it in FileMaker. Let's make a new record. We're going to give it a name. There is a default of 1 year for the expiration, 365 days. You can do as more if you want. So we'll do 1,000 here. We haven't found any issue with that. Let's generate the key pair and then generate the JWT. Yeah, and we'll be coming back to these, all three of these in just a second. All right, so the server should be up. There we go. So now we need to add the public key. So first we're going to actually make the file where we're going to store it. And then we can just copy it, paste it right in. And then the private key will do the same. And then we need to make sure we have the right permissions for those folders and for those files. All right. So now that we've got that, we are going to actually install Miniconda and Python and everything that's needed for that. So this is where that requirements.txt folder will come in. We'll eventually get everything that's needed to run the server at this point. So let's make sure we're in the right place. All right, so now Miniconda's been installed. We're going to actually activate it. You can see this base, that's the base environment we are in. And then this command, this conda init all is what actually makes it so that will activate every time we log into the server rather than having to run this activate every time. So now we're going to make our own new environment, which I'm just going to call LLM demo. Need to confirm that. All right. And then we'll activate that environment. All right. And now we can install Python.
Does that need to be updated every so often, the Python version?
Possibly.
You haven't done it enough times to know.
Yeah, I don't know if we've done it for long enough to know.
Well, I think this version of Python works with this open source LLM code base. So if you were to get, let's say, FileMaker 21.2 that has new LLM files, we probably have a new version of Python you would need.
Okay.
Right. And then this is going through, and we're going to be installing a lot of the different libraries and just dependencies. These next two steps, this one that I just ran and this one down here, take probably the longest in the process. And again, that's why we're doing the 2XL instance.
So while we're waiting for these, are there any more questions that anybody has about what we've been going over so far?
Just an observation that I can see why it took you guys a while to figure this out. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, and we've barely started the actual process yet. What we've been doing so far is just getting prepared to start the process.
This is all the prep work.
Yeah.
But that's really helpful, the fact that you've got it in a file that you can just copy the command and execute it, which is really cool.
Yeah. We
Uh,
wanted to make it so that other people can come in here and know as much as we did when we started and be able to do it without any problems.
Yeah, that's cool.
One thing to note with this command, right now it shows everything is 100%. It says more hidden. It will, once this is complete, it'll return it'll return the command line to us. So it might not look like anything's running, but it is.
So these are all the Python functions being initialized.
Yeah, so this is all from this. So we're installing sentence transformers and Conda Forge.
And what is microconda? Is it an environment in which Python runs? Is that the idea?
Essentially.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's what in the Claris README instructions, it's what they use and what they tell us to use. So we're basically just following
You just
their
were going off of
instructions.
that. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I have to be honest with you, because I wasn't involved with this with you guys, that a lot of it's pretty unfamiliar to me. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah.
All right, and now that's done, we'll run this one, which, like I said, so when we downloaded up here, that open source LLM zip file included in there was a requirements.txt file. So what this is doing, we're going to read what's inside there. Inside that is just a list of all of this that we're downloading and installing. So we're just telling it to read and install everything that's in there.
So that file in itself basically has a list of commands of files to download. And we're just telling that file, go download all these files.
So now that it's downloaded all of them, it's going to go through and actually install. Like I said, this is the longest step for server.
This is the let it run and go grab a coffee step.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Now that we got it, we'll reboot the server. And then, as you can see, comes the big one. We're actually going to run and test the local LLM server. Once it reboots, that is one thing to note that we did find is that oftentimes the reboot after installing all of that will take longer than the other reboots.
Probably configuring a lot of that stuff you installed, right?
Yeah. Go. All right. So before we actually start up the Python script to start the server, we're going to make sure we have all of the right permissions.
I don't think they'll
Yeah,
go before finish running.
Yeah, there we go. All right, and then these are just environment variables. So we're pointing this PKI key file variable to what's in this file path. These next two, you'll notice again, we've got the llm.mydomain.com. So we need to replace that with the llmdemo.keologic.com. And then same down here, this key file. And we'll activate the environment that we created earlier. And finally, we'll run a Python script. This is included in that open source LLM folder that we downloaded. The first time you run it, it's going to ask if we want to download all of the a few different models. We'll say yes to that. Go. So it's just asking if we want to download all three of these. This all mini LM L12 V2 is what we'll actually be using. So we're going to say yes. It's going to go through and download all of them. All right, so it should be running. So now we can test it. As part of the Claris Academy AI Fundamentals, there's a demo folder, so we can download that. And let me just drag this over so you can see what's in here. It's going to have a different folder for each of the videos. We're just going to use this meetings_solution file. That'll has essentially everything that we need. So I'm going to open this up. And we have all of these instructions still over here. So on this initial layout, we just need to delete that. We're going to add this details embedding field on here, which is where the actual vector embeddings will be stored. And we can clear it out since it comes with something in there. And then if we open the script workspace, we need to adjust two script steps. So first, two scripts. First, in this configure AI account, we need to change model provider to custom. The endpoint needs to point to our new server. So we'll go LLM demo, geologic.com, port 8080. And then for the API key, that's what this JWT demo is for. So we'll save that. And then in this embedding details data script, we need to change this embedding model. It's right down here to the one we're going to be, the one that we downloaded to use. So we'll save that. And now this is empty. We can run this. What it's going to do is first call that configure AI account script, which will actually configure it to use the endpoint that we provided with our API key, and then insert the embedding. So let's, if I move this down, we should be able to see the result up here too. So let's run this. Getting a spinning ball.
When that happens, we normally get some type of error message in the
Yep.
the other screen.
Yeah, it just popped up on the screen. So we've seen that before. I don't think I mistyped anything. We can do, we're going to Control C to quit this, and we're going to running it one more time. We won't have to re-download all of the models. That should all be there.
Is that the right model name you have in there?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not sure why it's not liking it today.
80% convinced that Zoom just like disables most computer operations.
That might be true. What we can do, what I will try, I'm going to make sure that these actually ran. I know I jumped the gun a little bit on this, and then after rerunning these four, we'll reboot the server just to be certain. Now let's try that one more time. Let's set the environment variables. Now that we're in, we've already run those four. When we first come in, we'll still need to set these environment variables since we just rebooted. This, making sure to change these. All right, so it should be running. Let's try this one more time. There we go.
There we go.
So we see we now have the vector embedding down there, and you can even see up here it shows that we made a call post to this endpoint and that it worked correctly. So we've got it up and running. Obviously, having us SSH'd in isn't ideal. We're not going to want to just stay in there every time we need to use it. So the next step is going to be automating the LLM server with PM2. So we can just shut this down with Control C. We'll come in here to PM2. If you don't have an account, you'll need to make one. Otherwise, you can log right in. And we'll need to create a new bucket. I'm going to call this, since I guess there's still one in there, we're just going to call this LLM demo 2. All right. So back over here, we're just going to follow these instructions. So first, again, just be safe, we're going to reboot.
You'd have to do a lot of reboots.
A lot of rebooting, yeah.
All right. So now that we're in order to get PM2 running, first we need to install npm. And this is another step that can take a little bit sometimes.
Did anybody have any questions about what PM2 is while we're using it? Or would you like more explanation on that?
Actually, I would, yes.
Yeah, I would be curious about that
I've
as
seen
well.
it, but I don't know what it's really doing.
So PM2 is essentially a service that can run processes automatically on the server for you. So we're installing PM2, and this was a recommendation from I think Wim at one of the Claris webinars. So we're installing PM2, which is free on the server, and essentially we're going to have PM2 when the server starts. PM2 is going to run, and PM2 is going to run that Python script that we manually ran earlier. So we want the server to run it without us having to go in there and run it ourselves.
Okay, so it's
That's
kind of like
essentially what
Apple
it
Crypt
is.
for Ubuntu. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, essentially.
All right, so now that that's been installed, this step, it's a PM2 link, and then we'll get keys from the website. PM2, similar to what we've got there, we can just click on this and copy that to the clipboard and run it. We'll know it's successful because this website should change showing us that we've successfully linked. All right, so now if we come back in here, as you may have guessed, our next step is to reboot.
Another reboot.
All right, so first, since we're back in, we're just going to activate the environment that we created earlier. And then we're going to run this command. This command, like Justin said, it's essentially chaining together these these commands up here. So we'll need to, because of that, we'll need to make sure that we're actually updating with the right name, which it's actually giving a name to the process. We have it saying environment name in there. It makes it a lot simpler if you use the same name, so you're certain what everything's going to. But then similar to above, we have this llm.mydomain, so we need to make sure those are all updated. And then making sure I didn't miss anything, we should be good. All right, so it's created this process called LLM demo. It's online. It takes a second to run because since it's essentially running that same Python script as earlier. We can check on its status using this. So you can see it's still running. There we go. So now it should be up. So we can come back in here. Just going to clear that out. And then we should be good to run this again. And we see we got a new vector embedding in there. And once again, you can see it shows that column here. So this is great. It's running it for us. The last few steps, we need to save this process since it's working correctly. So let's save, and then we'll do this PM2 startup so that it'll run on startup. And in order for that to happen, it's going to return this command that we can just copy, paste, and run. And then finally, just to test it, we're going to reboot. And once it's back online, without having to actually run any of those commands, we should be able to run the same thing and get a vector embedding in there And I'm going to connect just so we can see when it's actually back up online and we're not just playing a game of guess. So all I'm going to do this PM2 logs is just the logs from that so we can see when it actually starts up. So it's downloading and now it should be up. So let's run this again and there we go. So even if I exit, I'm closed out, terminal's closed, we can come in here and still run it, get the vector embedding. So now without us having to be SSH'd in and having to run everything, we have a local LLM up and running that we can use to create embeddings, to perform semantic finds, to do whatever it is we need. So that is the process from start to finish. In order to get that local LLM server up and running.
Now, if you wanted to use a different LLM, would the process be basically the same?
You're talking about a different model.
Yes. Well,
So you can,
you have I think you had 3 models there, but I mean a completely separate set. Like provided by a different outfit.
so potentially you would have to, we're following the instructions that Claris gave us for their models that they include in their open source LLM folder. So if you were to go out and find other models and want to utilize those models,
Yes.
you may be able to just include them in that open source LLM list of
That's
models.
what I was wondering. Okay.
We haven't tried that, so that would be an interesting thing to try out to see if you could go out and find a different model and have it be used with the same process. That's something that we have not tried or tested.
With the authenticate script, you can use to ChatGPT or Cohere or custom. So anything we'd be talking about of that nature where you're downloading and setting up yourself would always be in the custom category, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, and I'm not sure in the README file that Claris gives you with the open source LLM folder, it may include instructions of how you can add your own model to their list of models. So that they may help answer that question. Otherwise you may want to look, maybe there may be some other people in the community who have done that.
Yeah, so this is that README file Justin's talking about. It's not, again, it's not as verbose. Like this just starts at the create a conda environment down here. This is where that really starts. So you could, when reading through this or some of the other files that are in there, this is everything that's in there.
Right.
You may be able to add your own, do whatever you might need to there. But this is what Claris provides.
And Patrick, can you open up the settings file? I'm not sure if it's that one or the other one, but let's take a look at both of those settings files.
So there's
no, it is the
two.
JSON file.
Yeah, and this one just shows the different models that are in there.
Have you had much chance to actually use it in semantic search and stuff like that, this model, and how it performs, or were you pretty happy with the results?
Yeah, we've tested it out, and everything that I've tested has been good. I haven't seen any issues with it. I know, Justin, you've also done some tests.
Yeah, we've used it for doing semantic searches on things like proposals, trying to find.
Yeah, I saw that. So you use this for that one? Yeah.
Yeah. So we've done it for that, or like looking for timesheets, trying to find patterns in timesheets. So I mean, it works pretty well. It works as well as any of the other uh semantic search LLMs that I've seen.
Cool. And when you send it information, again, because this is now your model, so you're not worried about security the same way. Are you training the model as you go, or is this just using the training that's already in the model? Do you know?
I don't know the answer, but I would guess that you're not training the model.
Yeah.
You're basically using the vectors that are already in there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, one thing to note with the different models that again, if you so this is mentioned too in the Claris Academy AI Fundamentals course. So if you haven't, I would highly recommend to check it out. But a lot of the performing semantic finds and cosine similarity, it's all based on using the same model all throughout the system. So if you start with say this all mini LM L12V2, and then down the road want to try out a different model, you would want to regenerate all the vector embeddings using the new model in order to get everything to properly function.
And also, if potentially you wanted to have different vector embeddings for different maybe fields in a given record, like let's say you have a description field that you want to search on, but you also have like a title field that you want people to be able to search on, you would also want to create two different vector embeddings for each field if you wanted to search differently on them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now that we have this up and running, are there any if there's any questions on how to actually utilize local LLMs in FileMaker, or if there's anything that you'd like for us to show you, features of this, we'd be happy to do that if there's anything from the group that you're interested in seeing.
Have you found any significant differences in using your local, well, quasi-local, because it's actually on AWS LLM, versus using OpenAI or Mistral or one of those guys directly? Is the prompt setup pretty much the same, or?
On the FileMaker side, it's
Yeah.
exactly the same.
Okay.
The only is literally the only difference is just picking out the model name and setting up the endpoint correctly. But as far as the process is concerned, it's the same. Now, we right now have that server up as a 2 extra large in AWS. If we were to make that server a micro or a small, it may take a little bit of time for the vector embedding to get created. But I haven't really seen that be too much of an issue. And obviously you could always beef up the size of the server as needed for performance purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So the main thing is to use it while you're configuring it, then tone it down to something you find useful.
Yeah, like if we were going to use this server in like live, if we were going to start using this for real, we would shut it down right now, change it to a T3A small or a T3A medium, and then turn it back on.
Cool.
Because we don't want to pay for a 2x large to sit around most of the time and not do anything.
Not doing anything.
And then it's recommended, I think, Chris Light in the AI Players Academy course recommends, and we've seen it be useful, is to actually create the vector embeddings using some type of nightly server script or some type of server script where you're not having to wait for those vector embeddings on your computer to get created. Because the vector embeddings really only have to get created one time, unless you change the nature of the field.
And then you could
Yeah,
have
you
it
change.
dynamically update that one record if you changed it. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
And now they keep talking about the size of the the number of records. So if you have a really large database, is it a good practice to do a large number of records, like if you're running it overnight, or does that just simply overload your file with so much data that becomes unworkable? I wasn't really clear on the scope of records that that it's okay to do the embedding for.
I don't think there's really a limit. It's recommended that the vector embedding or the embedding be container and be locally stored. So it's about, Patrick, do you want to actually show what's in that vector embedding file, in that .fve file? It's not, it's like pretty much like a long paragraph. So it's like adding a long paragraph to each
I mean,
record.
what we
Got
as
it.
far
could
as
It's
do
not
storage
like
is
is concerned.
even,
Yeah, because I just I just pictured when you've got a very large number of vectors, that just how big it gets. That's what I was wondering.
yeah, so we can even, let's just embed this as text.
Is that
Yeah.
FVE
So
file?
this is what's actually in there. The difference being this is stored as binary as opposed to this being actual, an array of numbers.
Yeah.
Which is why they recommend the container. It's going to actually take up less space and be more performant, as long as you're storing that container inside the file itself, not using external storage. But yeah, this is essentially what's in there.
And something that Chris talks about in the Claire's Academy course is each uh, embedding, each model has its own size. So some models will create an embedding that's 384 bits. Some models will create them that's 1,000, and some will create some that are 8,000. So depending on which model you use will be the size of the FVE file, or the size of the text. So that's also something to consider. Obviously, the larger the embedding, the more accurate the embedding will be, but the more performance hit it'll take. So it's a, as usual, give and take.
Like trade-off as usual, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to drop a link in the chat for that Claris Academy course.
Thanks, Patrick. Yeah, it's a really good course. Any other questions or anything else anybody in the group would like to see or hear about on this subject?
No, it's been really cool. A marathon,
Awesome.
a marathon session. Good job there, Patrick. It was great.
All right.
Yeah, having this cheat sheet, I'll call it, would be really, really helpful. It'd be really tedious to start over from scratch again.
Yeah, to try and figure that out would be quite a job. Yes.
Yeah.
Documentation is fantastic.
Yeah.
I have one last thing about this. It seems that the part having to do with AWS is not really restrictive. If you wanted to do the same thing on a standalone box on site, most of what you're showing here ought to still work there as long as it's still in Ubuntu.
Yeah, but as long as it's in Ubuntu installed.
Yeah.
That's really step one. What we have in here is creating an Ubuntu server using AWS. You could use that on your own standalone machine, just in a closet in the office. Once you've got that set up, then the instructions should be the same from there.
Yeah. I think that might be not a bad thing to do for development purposes. I don't think you'd want to leave it that way live if your users are geographically dispersed. You're better off with AWS, but for development and testing,
Like a
I could see
sandbox, yeah,
having a standalone
yeah,
box
yeah, I think it
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yep.
be cheaper.
A lot cheaper,
And
yeah.
Yeah.
I know so a number of developers have also figured out how to get this on their Mac. So you can literally have it running on your computer.
As a
So that's
virtual
another option.
machine.
I don't even know if it needs to be a virtual machine. I think when Wim was showing it, because during the Claris session, he was showing it from his computer and having it run from his MacBook. And it didn't look like it was a virtual machine. I think it was literally running on his computer.
Cool.
I did it a
Yeah.
while ago. I mean, this was over a year ago, and I had it running under, this is a little bit odd, but I spun up a Windows 11 under Parallels
Hmm.
and set up the LLM in there and was able to connect it to the FileMaker running on the Mac side. And it worked. Oddly enough, it worked. It was slower than molasses. I mean, I would never recommend that.
Not very
Yeah.
practical, right? Yeah.
No, not at all. But it
Yeah,
did work.
because that's the ARM version of Windows 11, right? That has to run on the Mac Silicon. It's an ARM.
Yes, that was what I was doing at the time. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank
was
you very
great.
much. That's great.
Yeah, that was really, really very insightful. That was great. Thanks, guys.
And your link works,
Awesome.
by the way. I tried it.
Glad to
Awesome.
hear.